They thought they could bury him in fines. The HOA came after a black man with everything they had, charging him $250,000 for so-called violations on land that had been in his family for generations. To them, he was powerless. Just one man against a powerful machine. But what they didn't know was that he carried a secret, one so devastating it would flip the balance of power overnight, leaving the HOA stunned, humiliated, and trapped in their own game. How did a single man turn their attack into the ultimate checkmate? It all began with a piece of land that meant more than just soil and property lines. For generations, his family had poured their sweat into it, planting trees, raising children, and building a legacy meant to last. That land wasn't just acreage. It was history, memory, and pride woven together. But when the HOA set their sights on it, they didn't see any of that. They only saw control, power, and the chance to flex their authority. The man wasn't wealthy. He didn't live in a mansion or drive a luxury car. He was quiet, hard-working, and content with what was his. But to the HOA, he was an easy target, a black man they believed would bend under pressure. They sent letter after letter, each one piling on new violations that made little sense. Fines for things that weren't even violations. Fees for problems that didn't exist. By the time the harassment stopped, the amount they claimed he owed had climbed to a staggering $250,000. Most people would have broken under the weight of it, and that's exactly what they expected. His silence, his surrender, his defeat. But what they didn't know was that every notice they sent, every dollar they demanded, was only fueling something deeper. Because this man wasn't just a victim of their greed. He was the heir to a truth that would soon bring the entire neighborhood to its knees. The harassment didn't stop with the letters. HOA board members showed up at his property, clipboards in hand, walking the land as if they owned it. They pointed at trees that had stood for decades, calling them unsightly. They claimed the gravel driveway violated neighborhood standards, even though it had been there long before most of the houses existed. They even went so far as to fine him for the color of his shed, ignoring the fact that it matched perfectly with the community guidelines. Each notice felt like an attack, not just on him, but on his family's dignity. Neighbors whispered, some avoiding eye contact altogether, afraid to cross the HOA. Others smirked, as if they enjoyed seeing him pushed down. And with every new accusation, the weight grew heavier, $50, $000, $100,000, until finally, the demand hit that unthinkable $250,000. It was more than the value of most people's homes, more than enough to strip him of everything his family had worked for. The HOA believed they had him cornered. They assumed he would fold, forced to sell the land to pay the debt. That's how they operated: bully, intimidate, and take. And if he resisted, they had the legal system on their side, or so they thought. But what they underestimated was his patience. While they plotted his downfall, he studied every detail. He looked deeper into the very structure of the HOA, into the contracts, deeds, and history of the land itself. And there, buried in the paperwork that no one bothered to read, he uncovered the truth, one that changed everything. This land wasn't just his property. It was the foundation of the entire neighborhood. Decades earlier, his grandfather had signed agreements with developers that gave his family unique rights, rights that stretched far beyond the boundaries of his own home, rights that meant the HOA wasn't standing over him. They were standing on land that technically still belonged to his family. For years, they had built their houses, paved their streets, and lived their comfortable suburban lives on soil rooted in his family's legacy. And with one legal motion, he could remind them of that fact. The HOA thought they had buried him in debt, but in reality, they had built their empire on his inheritance, and the moment he revealed it, their power would collapse. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension as the HOA's attorneys laid out their case. They spoke confidently, parading photographs of the so-called violations, stacking document after document to justify their outrageous fines. To them, this was routine, just another homeowner they could bully into submission. But when it was his turn to speak, everything changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. With calm precision, he unfolded a set of documents that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. These weren't ordinary papers. They were land agreements signed generations ago that proved one undeniable fact. His family's ownership extended far beyond the single lot the HOA was targeting. In fact, it covered the very ground beneath the board members' own homes. The judge's eyebrows lifted as the words sank in. The HOA attorney stammered, flipping through their files in desperation, but they had nothing to counter it. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their smug confidence evaporating in real time. For years, they had acted like kings and queens, enforcing rules, issuing fines, stripping families of dignity. But now, in a single moment, the power dynamic flipped. He wasn't just defending himself. He was revealing that they were the trespassers, that the very authority they used to destroy lives was built on land that had never truly belonged to them. Whispers spread through the courtroom. Some gasped, others leaned forward, unable to look away. The HOA president, red-faced and trembling, tried to object, but it was too late. The truth was out, and in that moment, the balance of power shifted so completely, so irrevocably, that there was no going back. The man they thought they could bury had just unearthed a legacy that placed the entire HOA in checkmate. When the final gavel struck, the courtroom was no longer the HOA's battleground. It was his victory. The $250,000 in fines? Dismissed in full. The board's authority? Shaken to its core. What they had built on intimidation collapsed under the weight of truth and history. But for him, this wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about something far greater, reclaiming dignity, reclaiming legacy, and proving that no amount of money or manufactured power could erase generations of sacrifice and resilience. The news spread quickly, rippling beyond that small neighborhood. To some, it was shocking. To others, especially those who had endured the heavy hand of racism cloaked in rules and policy, it was vindication. For once, the system that was designed to silence him had no choice but to recognize him. The HOA members who once saw him as powerless now had to face the truth. They were living on his land, bound by his family's history, standing on soil they could never truly claim. And as they walked out of that courtroom, heads lowered, the irony was clear. The man they tried to strip of respect had become the very foundation they stood on. This story is more than a courtroom drama. It's a reminder that injustice doesn't always win, that pride and resilience can flip the balance of power. It's a story of one man, but also the story of countless others who've been underestimated, written off, or targeted simply because of who they are. The question that lingers is this: how many more communities will need to face moments like this before change becomes real? How long before respect and equality are more than words on paper, but lived truths? Because in the end, this wasn't just about land. It was about legacy, and the unshakable truth that some roots run deeper than any fence, fine, or rulebook could ever bury. One man's courage exposed the truth, and that courage deserves to be remembered. If you stand for justice and dignity, like this video, subscribe, and help us share stories that remind the world power belongs to the people.